We are up to our one of our last presenters. Mark and I had the pleasure of meeting Tawnya Gilreath with the California Association of Business Brokers last year. She was exploring different platforms to try to advance the board and certainly the forms committee into moving to a more dynamic and robust platform. And what impressed us was how she brought together a board of directors, introduced them to the system from the beginning, and has seen it all the way through implementation with some rather complex documentation. So Tanya's going to come out and speak about that, share her use case with you, and then I will follow up and ask her a few questions after. Okay, so if you would, please welcome to the stage Tawnya Gilreath. Good luck.
Well, thank you, everybody. It's great to be here. First time in Prague, and beautiful city. Really happy to be here. Wanted to tell you a little bit about myself and also about CABB. So, what is not on here is that I'm a business broker, an M&A advisor, and an attorney. My first career was 20 years in IT. And so it evolved. I burned out a little bit on IT, came into selling businesses back in 2006, and got burned by an attorney in 2009, so I got a little bit irritated with that and went to law school in 2010. So I've had a very interesting road, but what I can tell you is that every stepping stone along the way has just been really phenomenal in terms of understanding the needs of an association, how automation, document assembly, and all of that can come together to really help an organization to grow, help an organization to bring in new members, retain its existing members. So I'm on the board of directors of California Association of Business Brokers and also a couple of other organizations that are focused on M&A advisory and business brokerage services. And I can tell you that as far as CABB goes, our association, it's a nonprofit organization. All of our board members are either brokers like me and have their own firms, or escrow companies, escrow officer that owns their own company, or an attorney that owns their own firm. So all of us are volunteers, and so it makes things a little bit complicated when you're trying to get it's like herding cats, trying to get people together. But our purpose really is to empower our members, which are all business brokers, and to help them be able to sell businesses for their clients. And so one thing I want to clarify real quickly, because a lot of people don't know what a business broker is. We are regulated by the Department of Real Estate, so we are real estate agents. But instead of selling houses or selling commercial buildings, we sell the businesses that operate inside of those commercial buildings. So if you think about, an office complex that has a law firm and an accounting practice, property management firms, all kinds of other businesses in there, we don't sell the building. We sell all those businesses that operate inside that building. All right, so our members are business intermediaries, and we want to help them. They're not attorneys, so we want to help them by providing them with forms and tools that they can use to empower them to do more transactions to help their clients better. All right, so in terms of enhancing our membership value, again, we want to bring in new members, we want to retain our existing members, and the best way we can do that is by giving them tools and giving them benefits and helping them to be able to focus on their core skills, which are selling businesses. And one thing to note, in California, we have over 400,000 real estate licensees, okay? We have probably less than 800 business brokers, and we have less than 400 members of our association. So we're like less than 1/10 of 1% of all of the real estate licensees in the state. So it's a little bit of a challenge. we're really focused on efficiencies, on helping to leverage processes, on helping our brokers, our members, to be able to do more, like I said, focusing on client interaction, on buyer interaction, on working directly with buyers and sellers. And one of the things that was really important for us to be able to do, one of the reasons that we wanted to partner up with Legito, is we wanted our members to be able to use our forms, but we didn't want other people outside of the membership to be able to use the forms. We wanted to, well, let me take you back for just a moment. The way things were in CABB, we started off with fillable PDFs. I know a lot of you guys have used those. And so when you did a transaction, it was redundant data entry. You had to enter the same business name, the same seller name, the same buyer name on all these different forms, because none of the data would merge from one form to the other because they had the forms secured. We went from that to the next level was where they were actually taking forms and creating them in HTML in a database. So it would spit out, again, a fillable PDF, but this time it was a little more secure, they thought, because the form was, you had to log into the CABB website before you could download a form. And so, the evolution was really just going from one thing to something that was basically almost identical and had the same issues and the same problems, right? It didn't really solve anything. So with Legito, we definitely have a solution. And what we did is we were able to log in either from cabb.legito.com or from our CABB website. If you're already logged into CABB website, there's a Forms button that you click on that'll bring you straight into Legito using single sign-on. So that's been incredibly helpful. Another thing we did, we used to have one page on the website that had a whole long list of different forms. And it was no search function, and you had to go out there and try and find the form that you wanted. At one point in time, they were numbered. Then they decided to make some alphabetical. But since there were no naming convention standards, so again, that created problems. So now we actually have things separated into representation forms, transaction forms, buyer inquiry forms, and then there's some miscellaneous forms that are kind of one-offs that you really don't use very frequently. And so that's made it a lot easier. Plus, within Legito, obviously, you have great searchability, and you can just type in the first 3 letters of the form you're looking for, and up it pops. So that's great. The members that have started using this, are very clear. Once you start using this, you never want to go back to static forms. I mean, literally, you can do an amendment to a representation agreement in 2 to 3 minutes instead of 10 to 15. And so it's just, it saves so much time. It's really awesome. I like Brittany's quote about, it's very smooth. I like it. It's making it like representation agreements for dummies. I know all of you have probably seen, hopefully all of you have seen those yellow books that are for dummies, where everything's tagged. So it's kind of a take on that. But John's going to come back up. We're going to do a little fireside chat and talk about some of the other things and benefits that Legito's given us. And there you are. All right.
Thank you. I'll sit over here. Very good. Well, thank you, Tawnya. One thing I don't think Tawnya mentioned was, if you're ever looking for a good example of training videos, you have a big group of folks and trying to get them to understand all the aspects of the system. She has done a fantastic job of creating videos which she narrates, and she goes agreement by agreement. And now members can go out to YouTube and pull them up, and really fantastic. So, use them as an example. So she really knew what she was doing there. And thank you for sharing your use case. Can you talk to the audience about what you've experienced in your different roles through the years in implementing technology? I mean, for instance, you were so good at creating the training videos, so you've probably done a lot of this, and you probably have some experience working with all kinds of people.
I have. I think early on in my career, and particularly when I was in IT, and that was my career, I did do a lot of training. I did a lot of training for, for end users on applications like Goldmine, CRMs and things like that. And so putting together training is relatively simple for me because, and particularly with Legito, it's just, you open up go into Zoom and then click on record and then start creating a document and just explaining what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I think that that's really important for helping people that have never used it before, particularly if they're a little bit technology challenged or if they're just, adverse to risk or adverse to change, like so many people are.
Because in the beginning, when we worked with the board, Mark and I worked with Tawnya, and we had the whole board on the phone, and what some of them said was, well, why would we go through these questions when we're familiar with our forms, right? And Tawnya did a great job of pointing out, like, I think you'd be more efficient if just the specific question was posed and you didn't have to figure this out. So anything that you did in particular other than blunt force pushing that through?
Actually, yes. I mean, I think that I gave them some examples of, well, when you have they're used to, all the board members have been business brokers for years. They're used to the forms. They understand the forms. But when you have new people coming into the organization or new people coming into business brokerage as a career, it's a very complicated career. There's a lot to learn, and it's not something you can learn in a day and a half. And so anything that we can do to make it easier for them is really a benefit. And when you can build logic into your forms, like for example, another feedback I got from a member was that now with Legito, when you do a representation agreement, generally it's going to be an asset purchase, and so no liabilities are going to transfer. So if there's no liabilities that are going to transfer, why do you need a column of liabilities on your form that just says zeros? Because now you have to explain that to your seller. So Legito, it gives us the ability to take away things that create ambiguity and that create questions and create issues because they don't need to be on the form.
Right.
Unless they do. And sometimes you might have a manufacturing company that just bought a $200,000 piece of equipment and the buyer is going to be required is leasing, and the buyer is going to be required to take over that lease. So now you do have a liability that's going to be assumed, and that needs to be in the representation agreement. But that's not, that's the exception, not the rule. So if that's the exception, let's have a question in there. Are any liabilities going to be included? No? Okay, fine. Let's not put the rest of that information there.
Really using the conditional logic. And then you also leveraged the tools in the system to educate too, didn't you? That they would understand what the question is, and so they could feel more comfortable answering it. Because I think what came up was, well, if we can't see the questions, potentially we're not filling out something that we need, and there could be some liability.
Correct. And also, we used to have a tutorial that a lot of people didn't look at because it was a separate document.
Yeah.
So you have a PDF. When in some cases, the tutorial content ended up being entered into a PDF tutorial as a bubble where you could click on the bubble, but most of the time you're not filling out a form and looking at the tutorial as a separate document. Right. But we did recently start adding in all of the help information. So when you click on a field, the help information comes up and they can read exactly what's required there, which is great for training because one of the biggest issues, or one of the most frequent mistakes that we find with business brokers is that when a business is owned by a corporation or an LLC, if John Smith is the person they're talking to, they put the seller down as John Smith. Well, John Smith doesn't own the assets. The assets are owned by the corporation. So the corporation might be XYZ Corp. That's your seller. John Smith is your authorized signer. So now we have that right in the questions and information that they're being asked. Clear. Yeah, makes it more accurate, and we don't have as many mistakes on the forms.
Very good. Taking you back just a little bit, because you've done such a great job with this, when you first started thinking about moving, and the challenges of that. I think you were looking at the market. Was there something in particular that you saw in Legito that made you think that's something we should pursue?
Yes, there were a few things actually. I knew I wanted automation and assembly. I knew I wanted the ability to build in logic. I also, it was the fact that you could manage the data and you could use the data, have the data transfer from one form to the next. Also the form sets. One of the other errors that our brokers make is in California, you're required to have an agency disclosure signed at the same time or prior to a representation agreement. And oftentimes, new brokers don't realize that, and existing brokers just get lazy and don't do it. And so with Legito, we were able to put it into a form set, so now they get generated at the same time. And there was also something Mark did so that when you download, it downloads both of them at the same time. You can still do a single download, I think, but that's not the default. It's a default for the multiple download.
So you saw functionality that would really fit your use case.
Yes, there was functionality because our goal was to eliminate, well, our goals were multiple. We wanted to obviously make things easier and less error prone, eliminate a lot of the errors. We wanted to be able to eliminate the redundant data entry. And the electronic signatures was also a big,
good, yes.
Yeah, that was a big part of it. We definitely wanted electronic signature because it makes everything, we can streamline the process so much easier that way.
And
So
in particular, what Tawnya explained to me was, having so many different types of brokers through California, many of them found e-signature applications to be cost prohibitive, and you're effectively using Legito Sign.
Yes.
Yeah. And have you had any resistance to that, or has it been embraced, or how have you worked with that?
I think that it will be used more so as we continue moving forward. I know that a lot of the brokers have integrations or set up, not from Legito Sign, but they have certain templates that are set up in DocuSign. And so at this point, in some cases, we're not 100% adopted on the system yet.
Right.
So as we continue moving forward, then yes, many of them will be able to drop their DocuSign subscriptions and things like that because they won't need it anymore. Right. Which would be awesome.
Well, it's always a work in progress. And I
is.
think when Mark is trying to educate folks on getting up and running, he tries to really drill in that you do it in the initial implementation, but it's always ongoing, right? You're always trying to foster that the usage and understanding. So that makes perfect sense. So with that, I think we've come to most of our questions. I think yesterday we might have been talking a little bit about how you've used permissions. Is that right? And so that role-based permissions, so that folks, when they go in, they can see more specifically what they need to do. So a user versus the board. Have you used tools like that?
Yeah, we have actually, so there are 3 admin seats that we have so that as the forms committee, as chair of the forms committee, I can go in and I can see everything. And I obviously change templates, add templates, do whatever needs to be done. And then, interestingly enough, my tenure on the board, when you're elected to the board of directors, it's a 2-year term. And so my 2-year term ends this year. Now, maybe I'll be re-elected. Maybe I'll rerun.
Right.
That's to be decided. But so Brittany is somebody who has come along, and she's also an attorney, or former attorney, also a business broker, and she loves technology. So she was a perfect fit for somebody that I could kind of groom and train and teach her how to use Legito and kind of hand her the baton. And so we're in the process of doing that now. And just really wanting to roll everything. get 100% adoption by the end of the year. If I had had my way, we would have had 100% adoption probably 3 months ago. But that's because I just tend to move a little faster, I guess.
Yes, yes.
So
And I think we were discussing with Legito being intuitive and flexible, it was important to maintain the institutional knowledge going from person to person, and you felt that the platform served you in that way.
it does, because again, if you're on the board for 2 years and our forms committee, the chair of our forms committee has changed 3-4 times in the last 5 years. And so when I took over the forms committee, that's really my goal was just, I have got to find a platform. I've got to find something that we can use that's going to be a permanent tool that we can carry into the future, because there was, the goals that we had for being able to auto-populate forms and things like that, people have been talking about that for 10 years. But either the technology wasn't available, or because we're such a small association, it was cost prohibitive, or whatever. I think as technology advances and becomes more cost effective, and and just newer things come out. I mean, the changes in Legito, when I first started looking at it was back in September, no, maybe in August of last year.
I think so.
About maybe a year ago. So July, August of last year. And just the changes between, October, November, and today with the clause library. I mean, that was awesome.
Yeah.
I wanted to use that. It was like, you have no idea. I mean, in our forms, it's like you have a mediation clause in 6 different forms, and it said 6 different things.
Right.
because you change it and update it in one, and then it doesn't get changed or updated in the others. And so now it's just clause library.
Oh, yeah.
Go fix it in one place.
Yeah, two important points. For any of us who have bought technology for organizations, you want to buy something that doesn't die on the vine, that that's intuitive enough that new groups can pick it up and support it. And then also in heavily regulated businesses, you have to find a tool how do you keep up with those regulations? And with the clause library, you can easily do that. So
Yes.
It's certainly a tool that you've used. It's valuable. Well, Mark and I couldn't be more excited than to work with you. Certainly working in California is a huge opportunity. And one of the things that Tawnya wants to do is really leverage the technology to build the membership across the state. So we really look forward to working with you.
Well, one of the great things that I can tell you is that the board of directors, they were a little tentative, as you know, from the conversations that we had and the questions that came up and all of that. As they are seeing more and more what Legito can do, they're starting to say, hey, how can we use this to help our certification committee? How can we use this to help our membership committee? Or how can we use this to streamline our membership application process? And so now they're starting to understand this is not just about forms and providing forms. This is really more so a tool that can be used throughout the association, because, again, we're a volunteer association, volunteer board. We do have a management company that we hire we have a contract with them on an annual basis to do a lot of the back office work. But a lot of the back office work, again, it's when you have the president of CABB changes every year. I think the most static committee chair we have is the education committee, and Ron's been running the education committee or chairing that committee for years now. I was co-chair for a while, and then I think before I became president of CABB, I was co-chairing education. And then after leaving, or not leaving, but after my tenure as president of the organization, then I decided forms was probably going to be the single most powerful thing I could do to really benefit the organization and to help drive it forward.
Yeah, well, and you did so, and I think you're going to leave a powerful legacy in that way. But again, thank you very much. We've really enjoyed working with you, and thank you for coming to the user conference and sharing the use case.
Yeah,
All right?
thank you.
Thank you.